a very good friend of Colombia, the Director of Cooperation at EPFL, Professor Jean-Claude BOLAY.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Officially speaking, as Director of Cooperation in EPFL, I'm very honored to be here with you and to be able to share this reflection and facts about scientific cooperation based on the experience you live between Colombia and Switzerland. But more than an honor for me personally, it's also a great pleasure to be here, because some of you know that I'm linked with Latin America for more than 30 years, and with Colombia, I would say, since I began as responsible of cooperation in 2001. One of the first meetings I joined with my new responsibility was in Cartagena, organized by KFP. And of course, it was a fantastic opportunity for me to know who are the Colombian researchers in Switzerland as in Colombia. And I never lost the opportunity to support the activities of collaboration. My presentation, I'm going to try to be as short in time as possible, is trying to involve this kind of cooperation in a more general framework before going to the history of Swiss-Colombian collaboration. Of course, it's for me a personal way to celebrate the 20 years of ACIS. ACIS is a very, for me, particular association. You know more than me that Colombian researchers in Switzerland are not only very numerous, but of high level, and with a high level of recognition in Switzerland as in Colombia. But as I'm going to present, I'm sure that we can do more, if not better, but at least more. Putting this collaboration in a more general frame, I think that first of all, we have to remind that in the contemporary world in which we are living, we speak a lot about globalization, exchanges, very often speaking about economy, business, financial flow, from time to time human migrations, generally presenting this migration more has problems than has solutions. We know through the different studies we had on skilled migrants that, as Jean-Baptiste Meyer presented before, migrants are in general a very strong element of innovation for the present and for the future. Of course, at this economic dimension of the globalization of the world, we also have to add all the innovation in technology without which we wouldn't be able to put in march such kind of project of collaboration which has been presented during 2 days. But we also have to remind and I think it was very clear in the last presentation of Echeverria, that technology is a key element of the progress. But we have to know in which social, in which human environment we want to develop these technologies. And I think that the Swiss-Colombian collaboration is aware of this dimension. For us in the now Center for Cooperation and Development in EPFL, the scientific cooperation for development is here, and we have to support it because it's typically a win-win dynamic. On one side, for the Swiss researchers, or researchers located in Swiss institutions, not only EPFL, but in all Swiss universities. But it's also a positive situation to learn together for our colleagues in foreign countries. Of course, I always try to differentiate, because we always ask me, but in EPFL you have an office or a team of international relations, and at the side you have cooperation. And that's, I would say, particularly linked with the context. I think that when we work in emerging or in developing countries, whatever the continent we speak about, Latin America, Asia, Africa, we have to know where we develop science and technology. And we have to focus our expertise on key elements of the sustainable development for these countries. And very quickly, and it was also part of the presentation in this afternoon, we see that we have to be very good in our disciplines, but we also have to learn how to work with representatives of other disciplines. And if we want to have more than this interdisciplinarity, an impact on the reality, we have to know how to develop partnership with other actors of the society. In Latin America, some data show out that we now, in most countries of Latin America, a large part of the population live in cities. A large part of the population continue to have low revenue, even if the global economy in Latin America improved a lot along the last 20 years. But at the same time, if we consider the decrease of poverty, we see that, as in other continents, the social and economic disparities continue to grow. And we have to have that in mind as scientists, and trying to see how, through training, through research, through collaboration, we can tackle these very acute problems. The first university were created in Latin America 5 centuries ago, so it's a long story. And it's nothing new, as in other countries, in other continents, for example, in Africa, we have, with these 1,500 universities in Latin America with more than 12 million of students, a very solid, robust base to be an important actor at the world level. But of course, in EPFL, like now in most universities, we like to compare. And we like to compare very often on wrong basis to see where we are at international levels. I put these references not so much because I think it's so important, but as some of you know, I was mandated in 2008 by the Swiss government to make an evaluation of the potential of scientific collaboration between our two countries. And one of the main elements of, not reference, but main elements of reflection among the high-level civil servants in Switzerland as in Colombia was to see, but where are we at international levels? I think that now, comparing with other countries where I made the same kind of inquiry, in Brazil, in Chile, in Peru, we perceive, based on objective element, that a lot of Colombian universities are of very high level, not only at national, but at regional, and in some cases at international level of comparison. I'm not going to go too in detail with these numbers in terms of % of GDP expenses in science and technology or numbers of publication. It's just interesting. We could go more in detail, but we just see that at international level, we have around 1.8% of GDP given for science and technology. We are not yet at this level in Colombia, but we also know, at least at the level of the commitments that Colombian government want to increase the resources, the public resources for research. There is a gap between countries, and this gap is not due to intelligence or quality of persons. In general, it's linked with the organization, with rationality, quality of institutions, political willingness, and of course, investments. It's not possible to have, during a long time, a high-level scientific involvement without having funding. And all the projects you presented along the 2 days, I don't know all of them, but some of them, have been funded on national and international basis on criteria of quality. And it's important to see that you have the potential, you have the staff working in science and technology. In 2006, in Colombia, the number was of around more than 10,000 people working in this sector. The last numbers I've taken from other sources say that very recently it would be around 20,000 people working, so more and more. Of course, We are not yet at the level of Brazil or even Argentina, Mexico, but I would say that for me, based on what I know, what I've seen, Colombia is really not only at economic level, it's really an emerging country in Latin America, and still more because this economic growth Colombia is living is directly linked with the development of technologies and development of science. The official commitment of the Colombian government in 2008, when our Secretary of State for Education and Research led a scientific delegation to Colombia to visit institutions and universities. The Colombian commitment, the Colombian government commitment was to give a stronger support to scientific and technological research, growth of public budget, stronger engagement of the private sector, and of course, increase the international collaboration. And we have to know, and we have to remind that the Swiss-Colombian collaboration is if we don't know the history, is like a strange story, because we could imagine that bigger countries in Latin America would have more representative, would be more present in a country like Switzerland, where we are very linked with foreign countries in science and technology. But in fact, Colombia, and you know perfectly that, Colombia is the nation of Latin America which has most and the most talentuous researchers in Switzerland. And it's very interesting to see that this result is in part explained by the public policy of the Colombian government at key moment of the recent history. And it's also, and I've had the opportunity to see that several times in my job in EPFL, is also the result of your own involvement as researchers, professors, leaders, attracting new researchers, trying to attract Swiss researchers to go to Colombia. And I perfectly know that it's in 2012 it's easier, but I remember that in 2000, not so far in the time, but 12 years ago, it was a very hard job for you to attract Swiss researchers to Colombia. You did it, and I think that what I lived in Colombia, it's not only a personal feeling, is that I would say any foreign researcher, any foreign responsible working in science and technology is impressed to see the quality of universities, the commitment of the public institution, and also to listen to you or your colleagues speaking about the capacity of the institution to have continued to work with the same principle of quality, seriousness, in very unstable social and political period of your recent history. We see now that we have, and more than all through conciencias, the commitment of the government to continue to support the researchers, not only in Colombia, but also the expatriate ones, fellowships, doctoral scholarships, and so on, are present. But one of the weaknesses of many Latin American universities, and it's not a detail, is the relatively low numbers of doctors working in universities, much lower than what we can perceive in European countries. In 2008, the last number I had, we could see that between Switzerland and Colombia, we had more than 30 projects of scientific cooperation. And I think that this number is the best proof that there is a capacity to develop joint research projects. And I think that in terms of conclusions, and based on the fact that, as I said before, we know what are the positive elements, majority of facts are in favor of the collaboration, of this bilateral cooperation between Switzerland and Colombia. We know that there is a strong need for young Colombian researchers to have the possibility to be trained not only in Colombia, but in Colombia and in foreign countries. They have the chance, when they go to Switzerland, to be surrounded by senior researchers, number of them compatriots from Colombia. And I think that knowing the necessity to have more and more PhD students, to produce more and more doctors, to feed Colombian universities in the future, I think that really Switzerland represents a number of advantages compared with other countries. I really hope, and I'm going to stop with that, that our government, and I would say more than our government, because I'm absolutely sure, I know what is said in our Secretary of State for Education and Research, and I remember very well what the different ambassadors of Colombia and Switzerland told me. I remind very well what the different director of Conciencia told me. I know that at this level, these political decision makers are in favor of the cooperation. An agreement has been signed. It's a very general MOU, meaning that it's a general declaration confirming the willingness of both governments to continue to collaborate. What is missing now is really that this commitment is transformed in a more formal program of scientific cooperation. And as for everything, this transformation will be done once that the responsible institution put more money on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. I want to give thanks to Jean-Claude BOLAY, because without him, his teams, this event will not be held. They were very helpful in the logistics and in the funding of this project, as they have been helpful throughout all the history of my history in the EPFL. So thank you very much, Jean-Claude.